It's been a bit of a sad year for Obsidian, and this wasn't meant to be. This was meant to be their big year where they released two big RPGs, anticipated, Avowed, The Outer Worlds 2, following on from The Outer Worlds 1, which supposedly everyone loved. You can't really find anyone who actually loves it, but people say so, Microsoft say so, Obsidian say so, that's why they're doing a sequel, so, okay, it was meant to be a big game too. Sales suggest maybe otherwise, but it was their big year where they were no longer bootstrapped. They were no longer being held back by publishers, greed, they didn't have enough money to finish games in the past, now they had the support, the cash from Microsoft, so there were no excuses now. This was the time for Obsidian. But the truth is, now that we're at the end of the year, now that some people, not me, but some people who bought The Outer Worlds 2, many people like me, I think, are waiting for a sale. We're just not going to pay full price for this right now. It's not worth it after the first one. But enough people now have kind of evaluated Obsidian's output. And where it kind of is if you go back to the start of the year and you compare with now, I feel like Obsidian have less fans overall. They've actually lost people despite releasing a couple of relatively big games. Feels like their output as a studio has declined. Feels like if they had good people, they had them long ago, back in the days of New Vegas and Knights of the Old Republic 2. They're kind of has-beens now. They're just releasing worse products. Things just aren't getting better. They are getting worse. Some of their staff members even insult their players and say, like, we're motivated by pissing off the right people when we make our games, the art director or something. Did he ever get fired? I don't think he did. So you've still got those sorts of people that are in there. And it's now starting to hit the bottom line, it feels like. Their reputation as a studio has declined to the point where they're just no longer trusted. Avowed really just hit home with that. It didn't do very well, despite the cope of, no, it did well, there's so many hidden players on Game Pass and so long. Don't look at the Steam numbers, don't look at any of the sales numbers. Game Pass was where it was at. Well, that doesn't really hold up, because we know that Xbox are having a lot of trouble there. They're increasing Game Pass prices because they're not bringing on enough new users. The console side seems to be totally declining off a cliff, so I'm not buying that there's all this success with Game Pass. So with Avowed not doing well, that seems to have also infected The Outer Worlds 2. It's not just Avowed, it's also the first game, The Outer Worlds 1, which people just didn't like that much. Again, there's all this talk about, there's all these fans of Outer Worlds 1. We've always been told by Obsidian, Tim Kaine, one of the directors, the founder of Fallout, who's obviously a quality designer, but I've seen him just express confusion about people's problems with The Outer Worlds 1, and it was sort of an attitude of like, no, look, it's good, I'm seeing good feedback, you get these people who don't like it. It sort of implied they're just haters, that people who weren't that into The Outer Worlds 1 are just haters, rather than the truth, which is, I think, people just didn't think it was special. It was just kind of mediocre. It was very safe. It just didn't have that edge to it like the older Fallout games, New Vegas, and many other ones from Tim Kaine's own past, Bloodlines, Arcana, and many others that people sort of held up in high regard and maybe expected the same from The Outer Worlds 1. It just didn't quite do it. So because of that history, The Outer Worlds 1 not being so good, people just not liking it, even if they bought it, even if the sales numbers were okay, a lot of those players weren't super satisfied. You add that up with Avowed, which came out earlier in the year, there wasn't that much hype for The Outer Worlds 2. People just didn't care. The marketing was very iffy. Obviously, the $80 price tag that they went back on, even that aside, the game just looked like more of the same. There was nothing to grip people in and tell us, hey, if you didn't like the first one that much, forget that, don't worry about that. The new one, we're doing new things. We've listened to the player base. This is going to be way more ambitious. It's going to be way more New Vegas, all the things you were looking for. Nothing in the marketing suggested that. It was very much just, this is more of the same for a higher price. I think the original was $60. And if you're on PC, if you're mainly playing your games on Steam or something, when that game actually came out on Steam, it was 50% off because it was an Epic exclusive for a year. So for a lot of people, they actually got it quite cheap when it came out. And the numbers are kind of in now. We can see some player numbers, and the verdict is pretty clear. I think this is pretty factual to say that this game is a flop. It has not done that well. people are not buying it. The cope that, no, they're on Game Pass, they're all subbing to PC Game Pass or something and playing there. I don't believe that for a second. That excuse has been used numerous times and it never turns out to be true. Again, the whole Game Pass ecosystem is declining. Xbox is declining, so the idea that everyone's off Steam, they're on Xbox Game Pass on PC, no one's believing that. It's purely just fanboys of the game, basically. Literally everyone saying that is very invested in the Outer Worlds 2, and I'm not one of those people. I don't really want it to fail, if I'm being honest. I might have made jokes about it in the past and implied it, but the truth is, if a game like this fails, the industry as a whole, which is pretty out of touch, seems to miss the nuance a lot. It'll just be blamed on, people just don't want to play RPGs. They're not interested in RPGs where you make choices and you pick your skills and so on. That's too much for gamers. We better not do any more of them. Which is sad. I don't want that to happen. I do want more RPGs. So I'd honestly prefer this was a good game and it did well. Even if there's some problems, like I'm sure I talked about the companions and some other questionable looking things in the game. But overall, it's not like a Veilguard. It's not that much in your face with just feeling like a propaganda mess, basically. I don't think the Outer Worlds 2 is quite that far, if we're being objective. So I'd prefer it didn't flop, but I believe it has. I believe it has not sold well at all. It has certainly done worse than the first game. And really, given the increased budget and the increased expectation, I would say, from Microsoft, I can't think that they would see Obsidian this year as being a success with their RPGs, with Avowed and the Outer Worlds 2. Maybe Grounded 2 did better numbers and that'll save them. I don't know. I'm not looking into that game. I just don't care. I think most people interested in this don't really care either. So I won't say the whole studio has failed, but the RPGs, the single-player focus side, it seems to have been a big flop this year with Avowed and Outer Worlds 2, so not so good for them. And if we look at the numbers, what this is based on, it's pretty clear this isn't reaching, I don't think. I've been told in the past, you can't go off the Steam numbers, that's rubbish. But every single time I've looked at the Steam numbers for a game, and they've looked low and they've looked questionable, the game has been a flop. I can't think of a single example where I've seen low or middling numbers for a game on Steam, the total player count, the peak player count, the total number of players at one point who played the game the most at one time. So to give you an example, before we go to the Outer Worlds 2 ones, something like the Veilguard, the peak, the most people who were ever playing the Veilguard was about 90,000 people. And that game was a flop. EA said it was a flop. Even if you go, EA are just unrealistic, you can't believe them, greedy executives. I don't think what they were asking for was super unrealistic. I think they were looking for 2 or 3 million copies sold or something, and the game sold about 1 million. It may not even have reached that. So, Dragon Age, a series that I would say has a pretty big PC-centric player base. So, PC is a big platform for Dragon Age. It reached 90,000 players on Steam, and it was still a flop. 90,000 peak players did not translate into even 1 million copies sold. A roundabouts there. So if that is the case, and we look at something like Avowed, which had a peak player base of about 20,000, how many copies sold does that translate into? It must have sold less than 1 million, well less. And again, people use the Game Pass example, and they go, no, everyone was playing Avowed on PC Game Pass, they weren't on Steam. It sounds like bullshit, it doesn't sound true, because, come on, there are people who won't even claim free games on Epic. There's free games, you can get there, they're giving them away, and people won't even go on Epic. But there's this idea that people are rushing off Steam to go to the Xbox app to play on PC. I've done that once. I did that for Halo Infinite. It was purely because I wanted to play the campaign, and I could get Game Pass for $1, and this was 4 years ago or something. I did it, I subbed, and then I immediately unsubbed within a month after beating that game, and I never touched it again, so I just played the game for $1. So that was my one time doing it, back when you could get it for $1. That doesn't really exist anymore. And they've since put the prices up. So it's actually a lot more expensive to get PC Game Pass these days compared to a few years ago where there are all these really, really cheap deals going around. They don't really exist even on PC anymore. It used to be so cheap. There was always a way. Not anymore. So that was for Avowed. Now it's even worse. They put the prices up quite a bit, like 50% in the last few weeks before the Outer Worlds 2 release. So if you're still using that cope that everyone's on Game Pass playing, I just don't buy that at all. And we look at Avowed, 20,000 or so people playing, the peak numbers. The Outer Worlds 2 is less than that. It's about 17,000, and I waited a few days to look at this because we're now in the weekend, so you think release week, the weekend, that's when everyone's got free time. It's reached 17,000. That's probably going to be the peak. It's probably never going to be over that. I'd be very surprised if it ever went over that. So that's where we basically are. We've reached a number less than Avowed, about a quarter the size of Dragon Age the Veilguard, if not less, I think. And we're supposed to believe this is a success. This is doing well. I don't think it's done well. I think it has genuinely flopped. These are really bad numbers. These would be very concerning numbers, I'd say, if you're Obsidian. And we got told that Avowed with its 20,000, no, it secretly did well. All these grifters who are making up lies about it being a flop because they were concerned about woke stuff in the game and the art director. They just want it to fail, but they're wrong. It was secretly a success. They kept saying that. I don't think anyone genuinely believes it's true. It feels agenda-driven. Like, the people defending the game, they were more ideologically captured around that stuff. Like, they wanted it to be a success to show the chuds that they were wrong, but no one was really buying it. The Outer Worlds 2 did even worse, and I don't think that there were all these woke controversies around the game so much. It was really more just greed. It was more around the $80 and the fact people thought the first one was middling. That was the bulk of the controversy. Sure, you had the companions, but I don't think that really blew up in the mainstream as the same with Avowed and some different things. So, really, there were genuine reasons to not want to buy the Outer Worlds 2. Genuine game-related reasons, economic-related reasons. And the players made their voices heard. They just didn't buy it. They thought the first wasn't that good. You kind of turned me off with trying to charge $80. Sure, you put the price back down to $70, but that still feels too expensive. So we're just not going to buy it. We're just going to wait and see. And if you look around the internet at feedback, that is kind of the consensus, is we don't think this is the worst thing ever, but we don't want to buy this right now at full price. We're going to wait. I'm going to wait until there's a discount. Me personally, I'm going to wait until there's a discount. I don't hate this game or anything. This isn't even about the quality of the game. I've seen some people say it's one of their better games since New Vegas. Might not be the best game in the entire world. It might not be better than New Vegas, but it's pretty good. It's a solid RPG, and it is better than the first. Most people are saying it's better than the first. There are some people saying it's genuinely great, but the middle ground I see is it's good, better than the first, pretty good, maybe still missing that spark. To me, that's good enough to eventually buy it and check it out, given I do like most RPGs like this. Even if they're not fantastic, they're not 10 out of 10s, I'll still play a lot of these games and enjoy them, but just not for full price right now. I am going to wait. And that seems to be most people. That's why it hasn't done well. The numbers weren't even that different during the early access period and when it went on normal release, where it was cheaper. It was the normal game price. And that really told me it was like the Obsidian superfans who were determined to buy this day one. But anyone mildly on the fence just said, nah, I'm just going to wait. And that's where we are, basically. And the question really, is that good enough for Microsoft? Are they going to allow these sorts of games to still be made? More single-player RPGs that do seriously middling numbers? Like, 2 RPG releases this year from Obsidian have done very bad numbers on Steam, but then you compare with, say, Expedition 33, which was also a Game Pass game. It's by a studio Microsoft don't own, but it did way bigger numbers. It sold way more copies on Steam, and I bet that way more people also played it on Game Pass. It was a far more successful game. It was a very special game. If you're Microsoft, you have to be looking at that and going, hang on, we bought this studio. They've released 2 kind of duds in terms of engagement and people playing and being excited about it. Yet this other game that we did a third-party deal for in Expedition 33, that has blown up and been absolutely massive. We get asked every week, put Baldur's Gate 3 on Game Pass. Please do it. People seem to want these other games, our own studios, just fail. I thought Obsidian were meant to be the RPG masters. They had all the legends. They had the history. They're not really delivering. That has to be what Microsoft is kind of thinking with this. And with their new direction, it looks like they're making remakes, as we see, with Combat Evolved, Campaign Evolved. They've done it with Gears of War. They'll probably do it with other games, Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition. They're looking at safe bets now. They only want to release safe games. They only want to develop very safe products, very safe releases, probably not huge budgets where it's risky. So you'd think they're going to say the same to Obsidian now. No more Outer Worlds. We don't want Outer Worlds 3. People just aren't interested. We don't want anything to do with Avowed or Pillars of Eternity. That universe, there just isn't really the fan base. Maybe they'll get told to do a New Vegas remake or something. And, I mean, being honest, it's probably not the worst thing in the world, given Obsidian don't seem to have a lot of that creative spark that they once did. Kind of sick of these remakes. That wouldn't be the worst one as a once-off, but what happens after that? I can't really see a big future for Obsidian when you look at these numbers. These are bad numbers. Any talk about, oh, no, you're not looking at the numbers wrong, you're missing the context. There's no context missing. It's a pathetic number, 17,000 peak for a big RPG like this that they were trying to charge $80 for and has a bigger budget than the first one. The Cope extends. This really convinced me that these numbers are definitely bad when I saw the excuses for them and why this was the case. Because you look here, this is the RPG Gamers Reddit, and they seem to be big Obsidian fans, given it's Reddit, and they get very angry about the woke controversies with Avowed and so on. So it's the sort of sub that just wants this game to do well, and it's not purely for RPG reasons. Again, I can understand if you're an RPG fan, you want this game to do well. I agree with you, but some people want it to succeed beyond that, to own the chuds. That's like their only motivation. So you can see here someone points out, like, these numbers look pretty concerning. Now, he's posted a screenshot when it was 13k. It's gone up a little bit since then, but negligible increase. It's still extremely low, even from a few days ago compared to now. Basically just posts and says, the numbers look really bad, what's going on? And then you get these excuses. Game Pass game. Again, it just means nothing. On PC, Game Pass isn't really a big mainstream thing. There are some people on there, but it's bullshit that there are more people on PC Game Pass than on Steam. And again, it's not a good deal anymore. It's decent on PC, sure, but it's not that good of a deal. And then you just look at the economics of that, which is like, if you buy the game on Steam, it's $70 or whatever currency you're in. But on Game Pass, if you sub for 15, 20 bucks, whatever it is, and you just play for 1 month, and then you unsub, and you never touch it again, you've beat the game, well, that was a very small sale for Microsoft. That was far less money than if you bought the game on Steam. So even if there are people who are doing that, they're subscribing for a month or even 2, they're making less money from those people than the Steam sales. Then there's the people who were already subbed to Game Pass, and they were never going to unsub, and they just happened to play the Outer Worlds 2 because it was on there. Like, that's not even really a sale. That's not driving Game Pass subs or driving a whole lot of engagement, really. Like, that's just someone's getting essentially a free game for them. And Microsoft would have all of those statistics, and they could analyze that, and they would know, is this game actually contributing to our revenue? On PC Game Pass, it just isn't. That's just bullshit. That's just not happening. People do not care about PC Game Pass, which is why I think that they're kind of giving up with some of that, and Xbox isn't looking so good. So just come off it with it's a Game Pass game and Steam numbers are irrelevant. You could argue that more people are playing on Game Pass. Like, not more as in more than on Steam, but that there are some more people playing, sure, but the Steam numbers are very relevant. And then you get, what the fuck is this generation? What do the Steam sales have to do with a single-player game? It could be 50 people playing and it wouldn't make a difference. And then the fact it's on Game Pass. You need those numbers. Kind of just exposes that you're not looking at this subjectively. If you're trying to say that if 50 people were playing, it wouldn't matter. Like, the whole reason people are kind of concerned looking is, like, does Obsidian have a future? Are we going to get more RPGs from them? Now, obviously, if 50 people were playing, that's a Concord-level flop, and no, they would be closed down tomorrow. It would be that level of disaster, so it does matter. Trying to paint it like, what's it to you how many people are playing? Don't worry about that. That is kind of the argument they seem to be going for. No, like, we are concerned. We do want to know what's going on. And then going into the Game Pass argument after suggests they don't really believe that either. Like, that's just not going to hold up to any sort of scrutiny. So it is a lot of excuses. Again, more of this, you can't use Steam as a metric when it comes out on Game Pass. I hate people who use this to belittle Xbox games for their failures when Steam is not at all, blah, blah, blah. This is just so false, because again, Expedition 33 came out on Game Pass, and the logic doesn't apply here. It did extremely well on Steam. It did well on Game Pass, I'm sure, as well. Goes to show, if it's a successful game, it will also do well on Steam, because Steam is so embedded for PC players. They're always going to be there. They don't care if there's a better deal somewhere else, or Epic's giving a game away for free, or you can get a cheap Game Pass subscription. It is irrelevant. Steam is where, like, 80% plus, and I'm being, I think, conservative with that number, that's where the majority of gamers are, at the very least single-player gamers on PC. So if your game isn't performing well on Steam, and it's a single-player RPG at the very least, it is a flop. Game Pass, it's irrelevant to the equation, and it is just complete delusion to suggest that, oh no, you need to ignore the numbers. Like, Steam's totally irrelevant. No one's on there. That's just not happening. Like, the early access part of it, like, do you think that Microsoft would even bother with early access if buying the game wasn't a big part of what they're trying to push? They've made that clear. There's genuine leaks, not just rumors, like genuine leaks that have gone out with Microsoft wanting to encourage more of their studios to sell games, not just be Game Pass fodder and get people to maybe subscribe for a month. Like, they need people to buy their games once again. And where are they buying them? They're buying them on Steam. They're not buying them on the Xbox store or something on PC. That thing's a joke. No one is using it. It's clunky. It's broken. The games don't even download half the time. It's totally dead. No one is using it for the most part. And there's more of this. Like, on the Outer Worlds sub, I guess you'd expect this here. But it's like someone did write out something. It's probably AI generated, but they did write out something about why Outer Worlds 2 is doing badly in terms of sales. And they said some of the things that I mentioned earlier, like the marketing, the initial price controversy, which just left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, the problems with the first game, obviously, and it's really just the same cope. You have people saying, the game will sell fine in the long run. Smarter people than you have done the math on this one. The game is good. Chill. It's this same old tired argument where it's like, you can't analyze if a game is a flop unless you're an expert. The business people at Microsoft are experts, so how can you say it's a flop? You're not smarter than them, so don't even think about it. You're just totally wrong. Like, businesses don't ever get things wrong, and no business ever shuts down or makes a bad financial decision. Ridiculous. It's just, you only see this on Reddit, where it's always just rushing to the supposed experts. We can see the numbers. We know whether this is going to be a flop. Every business decision is a risk for the most part, and we're seeing, was this a risky one that didn't pay off? Now, he says the game will sell fine in the long run. I kind of agree with that. I think over time it will be a consistent, solid seller. The problem is that won't start until it's heavily discounted, until it's like $15, $20, which I think is the mindset a lot of people had with the Outer Worlds 1 after reception was middling, people bought it when it was a bit cheaper. The problem with that is if you sell 1 million, 2 million copies, but most people bought it for like $15, you're not going to make that much money. That's not going to pay for the increased budget and so on. It's going to have to move a lot more copies than that to be quite profitable for that discounted price. You'd have to get 5, 10 million for it to start looking reasonably good. And I don't know if it has that numbers in it. So sure, it'll sell reasonably maybe over time, but it's concerning that very, very few people have bought it for full price. These studios need that to really make their money back and to justify sequels or for Obsidian to make more RPGs. That's why this isn't looking so good. And there's more of this. Is it doing badly? People said the same thing about Avowed, and apparently it did fine. Hell, people said Outer Worlds 1 did bad, yet here we are with a sequel. Now, as far as I understand it, the first Outer Worlds actually did sell reasonably well. And I think we do know why. This has been discussed a million times, but it's like, Fallout 76, the marketing drama of that being a live service and people being frustrated, they were looking for more single-player Fallout. The Outer Worlds 1 was announced and the buzz was there at the perfect time. Everyone was keen. You had one of the directors of the original Fallout. They were advertising genuine single-player RPG with skills and choices and decent gunplay. People were genuinely excited. It was really the reaction after, as time went on, where people kind of lukewarm to it and went, you know what, this game wasn't that good. It was all hype and it just didn't deliver. So over time, I think the reception and the reputation of the Outer Worlds 1 has declined. And that's been the legacy of that game, that it just wasn't really all that good. But at the time, people did buy it, which is why a sequel was greenlit. It sold a few million copies. The budget wasn't massive. And there you go. It sort of makes sense. They got bought by Microsoft and a sequel got greenlit. It made sense for Microsoft to do that when they were trying to grow their exclusive games that were of some sort of quality. That's when Microsoft greenlit it, when they were still making exclusive single-player games. Now things have changed. So Outer Worlds 2 comes out. It appears to be a flop. I'd bet money on it that it genuinely was a flop. It just most certainly was from what we've seen. Microsoft are in a totally new era with a completely new strategy. I don't think an Outer Worlds 2 would get greenlit in today's climate, even based on Outer World 1 sales numbers. I think today Microsoft would never have greenlit it, so they're certainly not going to greenlight yet another sequel. So it's not happening, it's a flop, and Avowed, just more excuses. More, like, there's no one has really come out with any evidence to say it was a success. Microsoft don't have to say it was a failure. They don't really have to report that. They're only reporting Game Pass subs and figures, it looks like. And then they can make up that the sales numbers don't matter. But they do. They're trying to push it. It's the whole reason they're on PS5. The whole reason that they originally were really pushing PC, putting games on Steam originally. This has been a strategy from them for a while. So it's not looking good for Obsidian. Their recent lineup of single-player titles have flopped. I don't think it's looking that good for them. And even if the game was a better success, even if more people bought it, it may not have mattered because Microsoft have shown their hand. They're not really interested anymore in investing in these studios, in investing in big single-player games. They're starting to move away from it. Remakes that aren't risky and don't cost a whole lot of money. Live services seem to be a big push. All the leaks coming out suggest you either make a live service or you've got to make something really cost-effective that's going to have a 30% profit margin. That's where they're going. I don't think Obsidian fits in with that anymore. They're just not really making very good games. Even if they're decent, they're okay, they're just not selling that well. There just isn't that many people playing their games anymore. People are not paying full price. They're waiting for discounts. I'm just not sure we're going to get something like this from them again. And in some ways, that's sad, because you'd hope they could improve. Maybe eventually they get better people in there. Maybe they make more of an open-world Fallout game again, and good people come back and want to be part of it. I can't see that really happening. Maybe it could be Fallout. Maybe that is their only chance. Something similar to New Vegas. So that could be a positive. Could be some sort of remake of Fallout New Vegas. Maybe that happens. But certainly not an Outer Worlds 3 or some creative project, a new IP where they just take another risk. I can't see Microsoft allowing it because they've done this a few times now. They've flopped. People are trying to say otherwise, but just look at the numbers. This isn't good. Obsidian have not done well in 2025, so we'll see if things improve next time. But look forward to playing this when it is on a discount, because they've burned us a few too many times now. I don't want to pay full price. I will buy this some other time, and we'll see how it is. But thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.